The whole TDA-SAP process and how it fits into international waters, etc. Now we're going to focus much more on the TDA and how to develop the TDA. And there are three things or three areas that we're going to discuss in this first part of this module. Firstly, we're going to look at what are the steps towards development of the TDA, and we'll do that now before lunch. Then straight out, and that will also involve analysis and engagement and looking at something around the TDA development team, who you are potentially participants on. After lunch, we'll then look at system boundaries, how do you define the boundary of the system, and then we'll start talking about data and information. Okay, so before lunch, I want to focus on these three areas. So, you're going to see a lot of this diagram. This diagram comes back again and again and again. So we've seen this diagram. We've also seen this slide. The main technical role of the TDA is to identify, quantify and set priorities for environmental problems that are transboundary in nature. How do we go about doing this? That's really the critical question. And what I'm proposing here is a framework, a way of developing a TDA. It isn't the only way of doing it, but I can't, within 3 days, show you all the ways of doing it. But I can show you one way that I know works and has been used in a number of different projects over the last few years. So, we're here with this TDA bit, and these are the key steps in developing a TDA. If I just move on one more slide, you can look at those in a little bit more detail. So, the first thing we need to do, after you set up the group, and we'll talk about that in a moment, is define what system boundaries are. Because the system boundaries might be different from those that a convention states, or they may be different from what's in the project document. There might need to be a readjustment. And so, before we even start any other work, we need to make sure that everybody agrees to what the system boundary is. The second step then is all about collection and analysis of data and information. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, this, because in a way, unless you know what all the problems are and what the causes are, you don't necessarily know what the information is. But nearly all of the information and data that's available will be known by the group of people that are developing the TDA, or they will know people that do know where the information is. So it's a very, very important step. It's about collecting where the information is and analysing that data for its applicability to the particular situation that you want to use it. Okay, so this is the critical first two steps. Once we've done that, then we can start identifying and prioritising what transboundary problems are. Okay, so we can. This may have been done earlier on, in fact. It might be that this part is actually done, and we're going to be talking about that after lunch. So, you have a rough idea of what the transboundary problems are, but there might need to be a more detailed investigation of this. Then, for each of the transboundary problems that's been prioritised as being high priority, we want to determine what the impacts are. What we want to do is understand what are the social and economic impacts and what are the environmental impacts. And then we want to analyse what are the causes of those transboundary environmental problems. And they may be immediate technical causes, they may be underlying social and economic causes, or there might be some much larger macroeconomic root causes, global causes. We need to analyse causes for each transboundary problem. And then, in this model, we could then develop thematic reports to support all of this information. So we've got the data, we know what the system is, we know what the problems are, we know what the impacts are, we know what the causes are, but we now need to substantiate that with thematic reports. It may be around biodiversity, or fish stocks, or pollution analysis. There could be socioeconomic analysis, thematic reports. So that's one way of doing it. Alternatively, and someone mentioned earlier about going a national TDA route, you could actually do all of this at a national level first, then integrate it into a final regional TDA. But the steps are essentially the same. Okay? Does everybody get this? Is there some logic to this? It's very stepwise. Do this, it'll lead to this. Do this, can lead on to this. And by doing it this way, you will assemble all the information you need to develop a TDA. Simple. So, with that in mind, and we've sort of mentioned this before, the TDA provides the factual basis for the strategic component of the TDA-SAP process, the SAP. But the TDA should be part of a process of engagement and consultation with all the key stakeholders. I keep banging on about this, keep mentioning this, but this is critically important. And with that in mind, it brings us on to this idea of who is going to be doing all this? Who is going to be, we go back to the slide here, who does all this stuff? Is it Mike here? Or is it hiring a bunch of consultants? Or is it you? Or is it other people? But the important question is, there needs to be some group of people that develops this TDA, but that they are from all the key stakeholders. They are made up of enough of the stakeholders that this process feels participatory to those people that are involved in working, living in the system. So the TDA development team should be a broadly representative technical body that represents the countries participating in the project and that will participate in the development steps of the TDA. But it's important to ensure that the TDA development team is representative of all key stakeholders. So we're producing something that's going to be technical, so there's going to need to be a strong technical element. But that doesn't mean to say that it's just a group of academics from university or from ministries. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is to develop a TDA development team that is more encompassing than that. So, show of hands. Who's from an academic organisation here? Be honest, put your hands up. I want to see hands. Academics. Who are the academics? Okay, so there's a few academics. Who are from ministries? Who are working in civil services or? Okay. What about yourselves? Where are you? Ministry. I'm going to go around the room actually. Okay. Okay, intergovernmental organisation. Government. Research institute, so you're a scientist. Okay. University. Government. Private consultant. Okay. And who would you represent normally? Who do you represent?
Consultas alrededor de problemas ambientales en ambiente marino, quizás áreas marinas protegidas.
Government. Fishermen. Government.
Pequeñas empresas de pescado.
Ah, yes, you were representing fishermen. Yes. Okay, so what we end up with is we have, at the moment, if you look at you as a group for a TDA development team, there's a very, very strong governmental bias, I would say. There's a much smaller body of people here that would be just pure academics. There's a small element of NGOs, and then there's a couple of consultants, and then there's, I think, one or maybe two people representing fisheries. So, what does that say at the moment about you as a group? What does that say about you as a group at the moment? Would you say you are a representative group for a TDA development team? No. No. So I think there needs to be some thought around that. It's something to discuss later on this week. But I think we're all in agreement that this should be a highly participatory approach. And in order to make it a highly participatory approach, it needs to include stakeholders from as diverse a group of stakeholders as possible, not just governments and a couple of NGOs.
Considerando las experiencias en el desarrollo de TDAs o estos análisis hechos en otros gobiernos, otros proyectos, ¿existe alguna fórmula o algo cercano a una fórmula? ¿Cuáles son los porcentajes o proporciones de los actores que deberían estar presentes en la formulación?
Well, that's a good question. The real issue, I think, has always been that most TDAs end up recruiting the people that are easiest to recruit. And they are going to be scientists and government scientists, because essentially you're scientists, but you're government scientists. They're the easiest to recruit. It becomes harder when you start trying to bring in NGOs, because governments sometimes find NGOs difficult to, there's that kind of, sometimes that conflict. When it comes to people, interest groups, that is also difficult. And so most TDAs have difficulties with this. But the point, I think, is to recognise that it is an issue and try to make your group as diverse as possible. So, and again, this is a cultural thing. Some projects, let's say if we're talking about in Eastern Europe, companies that are projects that were involving countries of the former Soviet Union, they are very much of command and control nature still, and virtually everybody in a TDA